We're a group of spiritual freethinkers who gather to celebrate life, build community, and better the world. Wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. I'm Laura Wink, your worship associate for this morning. This morning's preacher is our minister, Eileen Casey-Campbell, and this service is also being live streamed to our YouTube channel. If this is your first visit, welcome. We invite you to sign the visitor's book in the entryway, and whether it's your first visit or your 1000th, we are glad that you came and that we are finally able to be back inside together again. There are a few announcements today, and Chelsea's going to, let me do mine. Please wear a mask. Masks are available for anyone who forgot one. We aren't able to sing in unison, but humming, dancing, swaying, and other expressions are strongly encouraged. Childcare will be available downstairs, I think with Jeannie Smith, by vaccinated volunteers for our children who can reliably wear a mask. Next Sunday service, November 28th, we will be virtual on Zoom and back with an in-person option on December 5th. And there is one announcement for the good of the community from Chelsea. Are there any other announcements? Okay, I'm going to step away so Chelsea can speak.
Good morning. My name is Chelsea Hunt, and along with Michelle Zappa, we are the co-chairs of Team 6, which is committed to fulfilling our 6th principle of working for our world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. One of the organizations we work with is Justice for Migrant Families, and they're facing a sudden crisis right now. So the detention center in Batavia is over capacity because a detention center in New Jersey was shut down, and instead of releasing the low-level offenders that were picked up, they decided to transfer them up here. So whereas normally Justice for Migrant Families is providing supplies, winter clothes and such, to 4 to 8 people a week, last week I guess they released over 30 people. So Team 6 was asked to make a donation, so we voted unanimously Friday night to donate $250, which is half of our annual budget, and we wanted to ask our congregation if you're able and willing, if it's $5, $10, but if everybody could help us pitch in and maybe help us match the $250 that our committee has provided to Justice for Migrant Families. And we've also been reaching out to our community churches who are geographically more closer to Batavia to help get some support for this really good cause. And hopefully they will also be willing to match our $250 donation. And if you would like to do that, the link is justiceformigrantfamilies.org/donate. And you can just go directly there and donate. There's no middleman with us. Just go there, donate, and yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea. You may notice joys and sorrows cards on your seats. Please feel free to fill them out at any time, and they'll be collected in the baskets in a little bit. As we prepare to be fully together, I remind all of us to silence our phones and devices. And we will now enter a space of worship. I invite you to join with me in our chalice lighting words as our flame is lit. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, hopes and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together.
Welcome. Come and gather at this table. This is a table of plenty. There is always enough here, and you are always enough here. Come and gather. If you have sat here for so many feasts, and year after year you return to this warmth. Come, sit, gather here if you never have before, and you look with apprehension at the strange and unknown nourishment offered up. Come and sit around this table, whether your cup overflows or you've shown up empty-handed, even empty-hearted. There is a place for you here, a seat for everyone at this feast. This is a feast of stories and songs and a love that never runs out. Come, friends, and gather here. Together we break bread, find that in its brokenness it binds us together as we share in joyful thanksgiving. This is a table of plenty. There is always enough, and you are always enough. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit and to sway, clap, hum along with our opening hymn number 349, We Gather Together. There once was a village, long ago and far away from here, and the harvest had come and gone, and this village had had a hard year. There wasn't much harvested that year, certainly not what felt like enough. And so the people's bellies were hungry and their hearts were anxious. And it was then that a traveler came to this village, an old woman walking past. She came to the town square, and she asked for hospitality, as was the way in those times. And the people of the village said, "We can offer you no hospitality. We are having a hard year. We don't have enough for ourselves, and we certainly can't offer anything to you." And she said, "Well, I have a magic recipe. I have a secret stone. And I can make enough soup to feed the whole village if you'll just offer me the loan of a big pot full of water." And so they were skeptical, but they agreed. And the people of the village went and got their largest pot and brought it to the town square, where the woman had made a little fire. And she placed the pot full of water on the fire to start boiling, and she dropped in a stone that she pulled from her sack, just as if she were letting go of her joys and her sorrows. And she got the water boiling, And as she did, they stood around the square watching her and talking to one another, and she started to chat with the people of the village. And she said, "This soup is really coming along. It's looking good," as she stirred it. "The only thing is, if we had a little onion, I think it would taste better." And reluctantly, a woman from the household on the edge of the square came forward and said, "I can spare an onion," and went and brought one, and they dropped it in the pot. And after some more time, the soup boiled, and the woman who was stirring said, "It's smelling delicious, but you know what I think it needs is just a hint of garlic." And an old man said, "I probably have an extra clove or two." And he went and brought them, and they dropped them into the pot. And she continued to stir, and sometime later she said, "This soup is really coming along, but I think it's just missing something. Maybe carrot? I don't know." And 2 households came forward with small bundles of limp-looking carrots, and they chopped them up and put them in the pot. And then a young family offered up, without even being asked, a couple of zucchini that they had saved, and they chopped those up and put them in too. And the woman kept stirring, and she said, "No, the only thing I think it's really missing is maybe that flavor of mushroom." And so several families came forward with chopped mushrooms of different varieties, and they dumped those in the pot. And she kept stirring, and they kept chatting and spending the afternoon together. As the soup finished cooking, came to a big rolling boil, the woman said, "You know, this would fill our bellies so much better if we had a little bit of rice." And all the families in the town came forward with just a small handful of rice each, and they dumped them in the pot, and the woman stirred, and the rice cooked, and the vegetables cooked, and the onions and the garlic cooked, and the stone cooked too. And as the soup was finishing up, a child from the center of town ran up with a handful of salt and a handful of herbs and sprinkled it all into the pot. And the woman said, "The soup is finished, and there's enough for everyone." They poured it into bowls, and everyone feasted that day, and they were happy, and they had enough. And this is the end of our story. And if you would like to go to childcare this morning, you can join Jeannie by the back stairs and head down to the RE room downstairs.
Go now in peace, go now in peace, save us from
We are a community that holds one another in our joys and in our sorrows, in our celebrations and in our pain. And so I invite you this morning, if you have any big joys or sorrows on your heart, if you haven't already, to write them on the cards you find in your hymnals or on your seats, and pass them forward as the basket comes by. If you're joining us from home over Zoom, you can type your joys or sorrows into the chat box, and we'll make sure those get passed forward for you. Are there joys or sorrows to lift up this morning?
So I now invite you into the spiritual practice of generosity. Donations from all of us is the primary way we fund the good work of this congregation. 1/4 of our plate collection this season goes to FoodLink, whose mission is to leverage the power of food to end hunger and build healthier communities. You can give to this morning's offering by placing cash or a check into the basket or if you are joining us from home by visiting canandaiguauu.org/connection/donate, or by mailing a check to UUCC at 3024 Cooley Road, Canandaigua, New York, 14424. In either case, please make a note that your gift is intended for today's offering. We are now gratefully accepting our offerings.
We hold these joys and sorrows in our hearts this morning. We hold Cortland and her family as they work through her son's cancer diagnosis, as well as excitement to have Thanksgiving together with our families, some of us. We hold Carrie in our heart as her beloved dog has a hurt back and is in a lot of pain. We celebrate with Bill and Pat as they commemorate their 40th anniversary. We hold the joy of a nice lunch with friends, of sharing an afternoon with friends planting daffodils, of sons' birthdays, of starting gymnastics class, and we give thanks for our family, for this church family, for warmth and smiles and support. We are grateful for the turning seasons, looking forward to restful, holy, and quiet days. For all these joys and sorrows and those left in the silence of our hearts, I will drop a stone in the water now. Now is our time for centering and meditation, followed by some shared silence. So I invite you to get comfortable in your seat. Let your feet find the floor, or some part of you feel supported and held by this good earth. Take a deep breath in and release it. I don't know how to save the world, but I do know how to slip off my sandals and wade into the brook rushing past after it's rained. I know how to let the water wash over my feet, ankles, calves, and to sway gently in its rhythm. I don't know how to fix all that is broken, but I know how to lie down beside the ancient oaks as night rushes in, watch the moon peek out amid a sea of leaves above me. I know how to let the wet ground hold me there, heady perfume seeping into my skin. I am clueless how to pull humanity back from the brink, how to coax us off the ledge. But I know, down in my bones, how to listen for the wood thrush, singing his farewell to the dying light, calling the night into being. I know nothing of how to save this world, only how to let it save me. year, even though we were very religious, Thanksgiving was the only time we said anything like grace before a meal. And always in the form of asking around the long table each person to lift up a year's worth of gratitude. Maybe you do this too. Some people make whole speeches, at least a few eyes tear up every year. Some hungry souls eager to get right to feasting just offer the cursory, thankful for my family. And one family friend has made the same offering every year in my memory. I'm thankful I still haven't been caught. We don't know what Amanda has done. We do say grace in my household now, when we remember to, which is probably half the time. Sometimes it's a poem that Rory learned in preschool. Earth who gives to us this food, sun who makes it ripe and good, dearest earth and dearest sun, will not forget what you have done. Sometimes we try to remember the words to Raffi's Thanks a Lot, which we never can do, no matter how many times we look them up. And my family are not huge fans of musical blessings, certainly not because of my singing voice, I'm sure. Though we do sometimes sing what I learned as the Johnny Appleseed Grace, in which the internet tells me is from a 1948 Disney movie, and not a grace at all. And one whose origins I do not know, that goes, back of the bread is the flour, and back of the flour is the mill, and back of the mill is the wind and the rain and the maker's will. More often than not, though, my family, not known for their efficiency in any other area of life, prefers a version of grace that gets right to the point. Most evenings we say, some have bread, some have none, God bless the revolution. I learned that by way of the Reverend Beverly Harrison, but her story was that it came from an Episcopal bishop and his friend, a non-religious communist organizer, who wanted a grace to accompany their meals together without injuring either friend's spiritual center. For some relationships, the common table is the only place our common spirituality is laid bare. All of these blessings are found at my family table because I've been seeking them out for years now. I came across this version of a grace at a potluck years ago by Rafael Jesus Gonzalez. He writes this: "Thanks and blessings be to the sun and the earth, for this bread and this wine, this fruit, this meat, this salt, this food. Thanks be and blessing to them who prepare it, who serve it. Thanks and blessing to them who share it, and also the absent and the dead. Thanks and blessing to them who bring it, may they not want. To them who plant and tend it, harvest and gather it, may they not want. Thanks and blessing to them who work, and blessing to them who cannot, may they not want, for their hunger sours the wine and robs the taste from the salt. Thanks be for the sustenance and strength for our dance of work and justice and peace." His words stuck with me, and I have since been on a journey of collecting graces everywhere and wondering with deep curiosity, what is the meaning of grace in our faith? Many of you responded to my inquiries this week about the table blessings used or remembered by our congregation, and I thank you for that. Overwhelmingly, friends, you do not say grace and never have. My own spouse insists the only thing that ever passed for grace in his family of origin was that moment when inevitably halfway through a Thanksgiving meal and at no other times, someone exclaimed, "Jesus Christ, we forgot to say grace." He did, like many of you and myself, inexplicably remember word for word that typical Catholic meal blessing, "Bless us, O Lord, for these thy gifts which we are about to receive, and from thy bounty through Christ our Lord, amen," recited at full speed in the St. Mary's cafeteria before lunchtime. We don't get much say in the things that stick in our brain forever. A new favorite grace, and the last one for this morning, I promise, I found only just this week. It's by the novelist Margaret Atwood, and in the form of a poem. She writes, "All bread is made of wood, cow dung, packed brown moss, the bodies of dead animals, the teeth and backbones, what is left after the ravens. This dirt flows through the stems, into the grain, into the arm, 9 strokes of the axe, skin from a tree, good water, which is the first gift, 4 hours. Live burial under a moist cloth, a silver dish, the row of white bellies swollen and taut in the oven, lungfuls of warm breath stopped in the heat from an old sun. Good bread has the salt taste of your hands after 9 strokes of the axe, the salt taste of your mouth. It smells of its own small death, of the deaths before and after. Lift these ashes into your mouth, your blood. To know what you devour is to consecrate it. Almost. All bread must be broken to be shared. Together we eat this earth. So I've been thinking in this week before Thanksgiving about graces and about grace. Grace as a theological construct is not something we Unitarian Universalists talk a lot about, in spite of the fact it usually has to do with unearned gifts, particularly the gift of what you might call forgiveness or restoration or salvation, and that our Universalist forebears were, of all the theologians, the most insistent that salvation is not an achievement, but a universal gift. We don't tend to share a belief anymore in a fallen world or sinful nature that needs redeeming, so we talk about grace in church about as often as we say grace at our tables. For me, the idea of grace is fundamental to my faith, though. And maybe that's why I've spent so long hunting down table graces. I probably don't have to tell you, but I will, that I don't mean grace in the mainstream Christian sense. I don't mean the gift of substitutionary atonement for my broken sin nature. That's some bullshit we don't have time for today. What I mean is reverence for the grace of this world. I mean a grace that holds the kind of brokenness that isn't a propensity for sin, but is deep vulnerability at our core. The kind of brokenness that is like broken bread at a common table. It doesn't matter much to me whether one God or another or the earth herself is the source of grace. It matters that the abundance of this world is gratuitous. We did not earn an ounce of the world's loveliness. We do not earn our way into being. Our being in this rich and lovely world is entirely a gift. One of my favorite theologians, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, was a Lutheran pastor who also had quite a bit to say about why the idea of grace that cancels out a sinful nature was some real bullshit. He did not put it that way, I'm paraphrasing. This idea that one, a person could acquire forgiveness or salvation by professing faith, and then that two, that forgiveness would cover any manner of terrible immoral behavior forever after, was something he called cheap grace. He wrote this at a time when his country of Germany was building a fascist regime and his own church was aligning itself with the power of the Nazi state. The church was offering the state, by its public support, moral indemnity, a get-out-of-hell-free card, an unearned gift. But that gift was, as Bonhoeffer put it, cheap grace. True grace, he wrote, is costly. It is not transactional, like a cover-all forgiveness for any behavior in exchange for belief. But it has a cost. True grace doesn't cover over, but transforms us. True grace, costly grace, is understood by knowing our vulnerability. I'm sad to say it's not hard to wrap my mind around what Bonhoeffer was warning against in today's America. We have seen for hundreds of years, and just this week, a system of so-called justice working in tandem with vigilantes and lynch mobs who serve its white supremacist underpinnings. We see a white Christian church that for far too long has offered this system cheap grace. A gift that is certainly undeserved and unearned, but not substantive at all. If you're a young white man with a promising future as a domestic terrorist, just profess your faith in the Christian empire and your sins are pre-forgiven. No accountability, no transforming faith, just the cheapest of grace. The posturing in the name of security gives away how flimsy this version of grace truly is. Only in our vulnerability can we know true grace. My 5-year-old often complains that situations he objects to are really not fair, even when they're objectively quite fair. He has to share something he wanted all of with his sibling, really not fair. And I laugh at him because he's 5 and he doesn't understand fairness and it's silly, but we are the same as adults sometimes, aren't we? We feel a sense of unfairness when we don't receive everything we feel absolutely entitled to. This is the feeling that fuels white Christian America to show up at school board meetings like they will here in Canandaigua tomorrow evening and demand we not teach our children anything that makes them uncomfortable, anything that calls into question what they feel entitled to or exposes the shoddy walls of imagined security and control erected by cheap grace. It is closer to our own hearts, the feeling that shows up when we imagine what we personally might have to give up to enable the free and just world we imagine. It is the fear that creeps in when we start to realize we cannot control our own fates. It is not us who decides when we live or die, but the gateway to gratitude by way of grace is vulnerability. I was with a young woman once as a hospital chaplain after she received a terminal diagnosis. In between her sobs, she whispered, "It's just not fair." I sat with her and affirmed that yes, it feels immensely unfair. She expected a long life, and her diagnosis felt like a theft of what she was entitled to. I saw her again a few months later and much sicker when she was asking her medical team to stop her treatments and transfer her to comfort care. I asked if she was still having those big feelings of injustice, and she said, "You know, I've realized fairness doesn't really come into it. Approaching death has made me see that my life was a gift and not a day of it was promised to me. If it were, I'd just feel entitled instead of grateful, and really grateful feels better." This is the cost of grace. Grace is costly in that understanding it, fully receiving its magnitude in our life, costs us our security, our sense of security anyway, because leaning into grace means realizing our sense of security has been an illusion. Only in our vulnerability can we know grace. Only then can we know gratitude, thanksgiving. When we know we are not in total control, it leaves room for the grace of this earth to enter in, for the sun-ripened tomato that might not have been, light filtered through golden leaves in woods we did not plant, the little bird on the windowsill. For those gifts of life unearned and maybe undeserved, for the gift of knowing that our lives themselves are gratuitous. We do not earn our way into the web of life and cannot, by any effort of our own, guarantee our security in it. And if we could, we'd have no reason to be thankful for it. I think this is why we say grace at a table. Even when we don't say any special or fancy words, it's why we lift up thanks as we break the bodies of the earth. It is in our time of taking shelter in society's many illusions of individualism and control, a moment when we cannot ignore the vulnerability of life, of our own lives. Only the broken bread can feed us. We must take life to sustain our own, and its sustenance relies on grace. I know I promised you no more graces, but this probably counts as one. I have carried these words on a little card from Wendell Berry, from kitchen to kitchen everywhere I've lived in my adult life. He wrote, "We cannot live harmlessly or strictly at our own expense. We depend upon other creatures and survive by their deaths. To live, we must daily break the body and shed the blood of creation. The point is, when we do this knowingly, lovingly, skillfully, reverently, it is a sacrament. When we do it ignorantly, destructively, it is a desecration. The harvest is a great death. All our meals are. And saying grace is one way we own up to that. It's one way of sharing in the vulnerability of the earth so that we can share fully in its grace. When we sit down at a table, when we face one another and face up to our place in the web of life with knowledge and with reverence, we know our vulnerability as part of the larger whole. We understand the cost of grace. And we can, if we face it with reverence, let it lead us into thanksgiving. May it be so."
Thanks a lot. Thanks for the sun and the sky. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the clouds so high. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the whispering wind. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the birds in the spring. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the moonlit night. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the stars so bright. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the wonder in me. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the way I feel. Thanks for the animals. Thanks for the land. Thanks for the people everywhere. Thanks a lot. Thanks for all I got. Thanks for all I got.
This sanctuary is a table of plenty. Here there is always enough. Here you are always enough. I invite you to rise as you're willing or able. If you're at home, sing along. If you're here in person, to clap, sway, dance, hum, move as the Spirit moves you. In our closing hymn, number 205, Amazing Grace.
we can't sing, I'm glad we've got Bill to carry us through. Please join me in our words for extinguishing the chalice if you know them. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Thank you.